Post-Apocalypse Post-Terraformed Theory. Chapter 193, released in 2001, was one of the most significant moments in terms of world building and lore in One Piece. The warlord Sir Crocodile mentioned Pluton and the Poneglyph for the very first time, setting the foundation for One Piece lore that is still puzzling readers over 20 years later. Watching the episode where Pluton was first mentioned was special for me personally, because believe it or not, it made me come up with this theory that was buried in the back of my mind until it was virtually confirmed years later in Egghead Island arc. Let's go back to the beginning. The moment I first heard that Pluton was an ancient weapon that can make islands get nuked away, my nerdy mind jumped to plutonium, a radioactive element that relates to other elements commonly used in nuclear weapons. And while the planet, the element, and this weapon are all independently named after the Pluton deity, and I put this thought aside as a possible naming coincidence, I already formulated the theory that the ancient weapon was possibly a nuclear one, as the other ancient weapons were not even known to us in Alabasta yet. And even if it wasn't nuclear, the main point of this theory isn't in the name Pluton. That's actually beside the point. No. The crux of the lore was all in the title, Ancient Weapon. Obviously, when ancient weapons are introduced in fiction, the assumption is always that the civilization that made it was either very advanced in magic or in science, more so than the present-day society if the tech is forgotten. That was right before Nico Robin ever introduced hints on the Void Century, though it didn't take long for that to reinforce this lore as well. My mind was racing. There I was 100-something episodes in, and I knew for certain that ancient weapons implied an advanced ancient society. But you might say, Alabasta never really confirmed Pluton was as Crocodile said. Maybe the rumors of its existence and power at that point were exaggerated over the centuries. True, but I'm now resurrecting my theory with what we know post-Wano, and if Crocodile was written to be certain about Pluton and its existence, there was a chance he was right. And with that supposition at the time, the conclusion eventually was inevitable. The One Piece world is a post-apocalyptic one, and it was evident all along. After Egghead Island confirmed this by noting how Vegapunk was mostly copying ancient technology, and outright saying a lot of the ancient tech is still beyond him, many readers began noticing these things that other readers have subconsciously noticed for years already. The One Piece world is very anachronistic. The modern fashion, like suits, amenities like fridges, all of it is not normal in a pirate fantasy world set in their version of the 1500s. Most of us, like myself, likely just attributed this to the world's natural setting. It's just how it's written. In the multiverse, this was simply a world where fashion and tech were all over the place because of the weird geography. They say as much in Little Garden. Some islands are prehistoric, while others are downright 20th century. I was willing to accept this was just how the world worked. But Crocodile and Nico Robin planted the seed that never disappeared. Some apocalypse set the world back. I just couldn't prove it, so I set it aside for years. This brings up part 2 of my theory. While it is possible that the apocalypse had nothing to do with the unique geography of the One Piece world, something about it bugs all of us. The Grand Line, the Red Line, the Calm Belts, the Magnetic Islands. It is possible that's just how the world works, but it is also possible that it used to be different in the before time. As I plan to discuss in another theory, the amount of real-world references, especially lingual, cultural, and religious ones, in the One Piece world has left me with 2 options. Either this is simply a universe parallel with ours, and these things are just normal, or the before time was one almost identical with the real world, with all of the supernatural aspects being a result of centuries of advanced science and war, and perhaps something supernatural yet to be revealed. I won't push this theory too strongly, but if it's right, that means One Piece, like I noticed some of us already believe, takes place in the future. The future of a world like ours. And I think if this turns out to be true, there were hints laid out for it. Chapter 963 and 964. Cat Viper and Dogstorm mentioned that they thought there were more than 5 islands in the world, which was of course severely ignorant and incorrect. But if we are to recognize Oda's style of misdirection and subtle hints, what if that's a clue? Remember that Zou was isolated for 1,000 years, so while it makes sense that Minks would know nothing concrete about the rest of the world, is it not strange that they have a rumor like that passed along? They managed to pass down their connection to the Kozuki clan without trouble, so why do they think there's half a dozen islands? It can simply be time creating myths, or it could be that they passed down accurate geographical info that became that rumor. What if the before time had no red line and millions of islands? What if there were 5 or 6 or maybe 7 continents that were forgotten by the world outside of Zoe and is what inspired Cat Viper and Dogstorm to believe there were only 5 islands in the world? I think the biggest obstacle for this theory is the existence of the many sentient races, like mermaids, minks, and giants. It would be a big shocker for Oda to reveal they were all created at some point, and I admit it's far-fetched. Maybe they all existed from the start in the world that looks like ours, and the ancient weapons terraformed the world to look like this? Or maybe someone did make the various races using ancient science. Whether they're natural or artificial, all I know is that this fantasy world was actually science fiction all along. I would not rule this out just yet. In the end, if it turns out that the before time had a geography similar to the real world, or it doesn't even have to be like the real world, it could just be different, I would consider this theory an accurate one. Watching this theory grow in the back of my head over the years was really enjoyable because it brought up so many questions that we wouldn't have asked otherwise. What was the world like thousands of years ago? Was it really more advanced than anything that they could imagine? There's a very good chance that it takes place in our future. Maybe that was the plan all along, maybe not. It doesn't have to be, but it's still something that we did not see coming from the beginning. It'd be such a curveball, I don't know how people will react, but I'm certain that some aspects of this theory is true, and I'll be making more theories like this in the future.